Alrighty, let's start. So good day, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join Epicenter in our live webinar. I'm Sean Bart Hebenar, partner within Epicenter, and I will have the honor of moderating this webinar. So today we will be covering the topic of unlocking the value of your HR data, and I'm very happy to introduce the presenter, who is Epicenter's very own Dave Doherty, who holds an impressive track record in the area of managing HR transformation programs across various multinationals, where the topic of the tremendous value of HR data always played a central role. So just before we begin, I'd like to take a few moments to explain a few things on how this session will be led. So firstly, we will record this webinar, and the link to the recording will be sent to you after this webinar for future reference, or even if you choose to share it with your colleagues, friends, family, whatever you like, you can then share that link. All audio and video functions for participants are locked, but still we encourage you to participate with asking questions. So please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A functionality to jot down your queries, and we will cover these as we go along. Dave will be sharing his screen today, and he has prepared a few slides in support of his presentation. If you are on a mobile device, you can easily zoom in to view those slides in a little bit more detail and actually see what he's talking about. Duration of this webinar, nice and short, approximately 20 minutes, followed by a brief Q&A. So with that, I would like to hand over to Dave, who surely will entice you on the trending topic of unlocking the value of your HR data. Dave, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sean Bart, and hello to everybody that's joined us today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you may be. And I see we've got people, I think, that looks like from a wide variety of places. That's fantastic. So yeah, echoing Sean Bart's sentiments, big thank you for joining us today, and just offer you a personal welcome from what is today a cloudy and dark London. I hope everybody is healthy and continuing to be well in this ongoing crazy situation we have with COVID-19. Now, one of the reasons that I joined Epicenter is because I have a personal determination to make it better for companies to manage their HR data. And this is something that I feel can sometimes get lost in the mix during an implementation project. Hence, the topic of this webinar is to bring the focus back on data and how we can manage that, particularly in today's kind of complex landscape, today's modern world, and how our next generation technology can help you on that journey as well. So if I just flick over so I can manage my slides, there we go. So why this focus on data? Well, in the modern world that we live in, data really is the new gold. And we see this all around us in our day-to-day lives. So you have obvious examples of this that we see every day. For example, the big consumer-facing companies that use data to thrive. However, the importance of data is more and more valuable for any business, regardless of their size and regardless of the industry in which they're in. And this is really no less true for the HR function. So as the HR function, as the role of HR expands, HR doesn't do everything that it used to do. It does that and more. So HR now covers more processes, covers more services. And so the data points that are required to manage those processes within the workforce are greater than ever before. Plus the fact that HR metrics have developed, gone from very basic metrics to much more advanced analytical metrics. And so that also increases the importance of the data we hold about our employees. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But managing this data isn't easy. So we're going to look into the reasons why that is and how that can act as a barrier to good data. And then we'll look at how we can simplify those data flows and unlock the value of that HR data to unlock its potential and to be able to use that in your organization to effectively manage your data and your people. So I had just mentioned about HR metrics. And long gone are the days where you can get by on headcount reports alone. Today, HR has much greater expectation on their shoulders. And so what I've done here, I've just got a few sort of sample HR metrics that you can that you may be familiar with. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list by any means, but it is a list that will give you a little bit of an idea about the kind of thing I'm talking about here. So these metrics can drive the analysis that can drive business value that HR can bring. So as a simple example here, I'm just going to take one of these here. Now we know the start date and we know the termination date for an employee. That's sort of very basic information. But we also know from that we can start extrapolating some more information from it. So something that's a bit more meaningful. So you'll see this one at the top here, and I'm just running my mouse over it. As Jean-Bart said, anyone's on a mobile device, you may need to zoom in. But at the top here, I've got one that says percentage of new hires that stay more than 1 year. So this is something where we can take two simple pieces of data, a start date and an end date, and we can use that data to derive something more meaningful. Now, if you have a high percentage here of new hires that stay more than 1 year, that's great. That means that people that are joining your company are happy to be there, they're engaged, they're happy to stay. If you have a high percentage of people that leave within a year, then we know there's an issue somewhere along the line, whether that's we're hiring the wrong people, there's something wrong with our onboarding experience, or something wrong with the culture that means that employees don't want to stay. So that's just a very simple example of how HR data now is not supposed to just present facts just for the sake of it. The point is that we're supposed to use that data in a meaningful way and try and drive data to add value to the business. And then that's what we can see on the right-hand side. So this is what the good data means HR has the potential to do. I won't read all of these out. You can read these as I talk, but the ultimate goal of these is that HR have the potential to basically improve the welfare and well-being of their employees in the workplace, which then makes them more productive, which then makes good employees more likely to stay, makes it easier to attract better staff, and helps to optimize the processes and really drive good value for the business by having the right people in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. And that's ultimately, if HR can do that, then that's a fantastic achievement. Now, the problem with this occurs when the data that we use to try and drive these metrics is unreliable. So in today's world, we end up with data in multiple systems all over the place, and the flow of data between these systems can unfortunately contribute to some data quality issues, which then means the value of metrics such as this becomes reduced. So whether that data be incomplete, whether it's inaccurate, could be badly structured, data ultimately loses its value, and this is something that we believe can be improved, and this is what we wanted to talk to you about today. So how does this happen? Well, there's a few reasons, a few ways in which this can happen. Now, first of these is having a varied HR technology landscape. We live in a golden era of HR technology, and when preparing this webinar, I had actually gone to the trouble of putting together a few slides about how the how HR systems have evolved, certainly over the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years during my time in the industry. But frankly, we wouldn't have had the time to go through that today. So I've just kept it to very simply what it can look like today. And as I said, we live in a bit of a golden era for this, because we're lucky enough to live in an age where we have these fantastic cloud HR systems. These are now the new normal. Everybody is either using them. And if you aren't already on cloud, then I'm willing to bet that your company is in the process of moving to cloud or seriously considering doing so. And there's good reason for that. These tools are better than ever. They're functionally incredibly rich. They're always being enhanced with continuous improvement, continuous upgrades, and they have an absolutely fantastic user experience by comparison to their predecessors, the likes of the on-premise systems that are prevalent in all of our legacy systems, things like PeopleSoft or eBusiness Suite, SAP. Cloud variants of these have a much better user experience, much more what today's modern workforce is used to and expects out of life. They're also agile, very flexible, and they also help lower the total cost of ownership. So really, the case of moving to cloud is quite compelling, and I'd say most people have done it. Now, however, as great as these systems are, it doesn't necessarily mean that a single global tool will ever do everything that you need across your HR demands and HR data across all of your geographies, particularly if you're in a large organization with a lot of kind of different business units, different types of employees, different geographies to handle. So, you know, geographical coverage is one thing, won't ever be able to do everything local. Expanded footprint of HR processes and requirements that I already mentioned. The fact that HR does a lot more things nowadays than they used to do means that even a core HR system might not cover some of the processes that might be on the fringes of traditional HR. But, you know, crucially as well, the fact that cloud is cheaper, that it's, you know, more flexible, etc., that also means that it's enabled other applications, other systems, other companies to create great systems as well. So you have a whole bunch of, you know, much like as great as Apple or the Android operating system is on your mobile, you know, they might have a nice weather app, but there's someone out there that's built an app that's even better, that gives you even more detail, that might be more suited to what you want to get out of it. And this is also true in the world of HR technology, where these core HR tools are fantastic, they're great, but there are other companies that do certain niche parts of those HR processes that might add more value to you as your organization. So for example, a niche function like skills or competencies, managing your talent, maybe certain parts of the recruiting process. The world that we live in now means that has enabled these applications. And so what we have is we have these great cloud core HR systems, but we're also still going to have, represented by these other little clouds dotted around here, maybe some other what we call best of breed cloud apps. So you have a varied system landscape, and you end up with more apps than ever, covering more processes than ever, which can equal a complex landscape and complicated data flows. Now, there are some other factors in this as well, because actually that diagram from the previous slide, if I just go back, this one, actually we can live with that. That's actually not too bad. That's one single core HR system, and maybe it has some data going to and from a few other applications. But there are other things that also come into play here as well. So firstly, in almost all organizations, we end up with legacy systems in place. It's very rare that we get the situation where we can plug in our cloud HR system or systems into a perfect environment with no other systems kind of polluting that or getting in the way. The reality in the real world is that we're plugging in our HR system into an environment that already has tons of different applications for different parts of the business all the way around. And normally in HR, we have to find our place to sort of fit and sit in the middle of that landscape. So perhaps there's old ERP systems around that still need to be around to support other parts of the business. We may have, you know, various payroll tools around the globe. Some might be old, some might be, you know, old systems or very manual. Some might be the latest cloud payroll systems. Could be anything. Custom tools. A lot of things that have been developed, maybe, you know, could be 5 years ago, could be 10 years ago, could be more, but there might be some custom tools very specific to your company's requirements that you can't switch off for some reason. Someone else is using it somewhere, or it fits a very specific need. Plus, you may have an abundance of third-party service providers, and that's normal as well. So we can't, the point here being that this is out of our control. We cannot control this, and so we have to find our place in there. But having all these other systems around and needing the same HR data from our core HR tool just complicates the landscape and makes it more difficult to control the data flows when it's going to so many different places. Not only that, we also have business factors as well. So there are several of these, but we don't have time to cover all of these today. But one good example here is mergers and acquisitions. Business doesn't stay static, and things like mergers, acquisitions happen. And so therefore you can end up with multiple HR systems, multiple ERPs, multiple payrolls, multiple custom tools, and they might not really be the natural tools to talk to each other. You can end up with from completely different vendors, and they all have to work together, at least in the short term and maybe in the long term, depending on the landscape and what decisions get made by companies when they're in this situation. The last one I'll mention here is shiny new toy syndrome. This is also something that's incredibly common. one side effect of the fact that we live in this golden era of HR applications that are very reasonably priced, very rich functionality, great user experience, is that sheer volume of apps in the HCM market can lead to unnecessary purchases. So, a company can be seduced by something that might be great for a particular requirement, but it might not necessarily fit in too well with the existing systems that the company has. I'll go back to my example of the weather apps. So I have a basic weather app on my iPhone. That's great. Do I really want to spend $5, £5 on another app when the one I have is probably good enough? Well, that depends how interested I am in the weather and getting all the detailed information. But generally, what you have in the application might well be okay. So these are just a few of the factors that can combine. So, take the fact we've got all these multiple HR systems. Then we've got all the other systems that we have in our environments. We've got the results of various business decisions and business developments over the years, and you can end up with something like this. So this is just an example diagram of what an integrated HR landscape can look like, where you've got your core HR tool in the middle, and then you've got various other tools that can sit around it. So you might have your Active Directory for getting your phone numbers and email addresses and user accounts. And you've got different HR tools like learning, recruiting, skills, benefits, payrolls, time and absence. You may have a help desk tool, and you probably also need to be connected to a legacy ERP. So here you end up with something that looks a bit like spaghetti, and you have data flowing to and from multiple systems. So a couple of examples here. When you hire somebody, they start down here in the bottom left-hand corner in the recruiting system. Then they end up going into the core HR system. Then they go to Active Directory to get an email address and a user account. They come back to the core HR system. Then they need to go to all the other systems that are there. So this can be quite sort of difficult to manage. And then you've got something like time and absence, where time and absence takes and sends data from various different sources. So we'll take your employee data from core HR. It has to send data to payroll to manage the payroll if you're paid by the hour. It's going to take information back from payroll. It may send information to an ERP. It might get cost centers back from the ERP so that you can log your time against the right cost center. So it's a great example of a system that sits in the middle of an architecture that takes data from multiple sources and also sends data to multiple sources as well. So the risk here is that it's unclear where the source is for some data points, and the same data points can be shared by multiple systems in the landscape. It can be difficult to manage a vast variety of apps, and it can be difficult to manage this variety of point-to-point integrations. Now, we know we have to share this data because we know that HR data needs to go to every application, not just within HR, but also within the wider business community. So our employee data is used everywhere. But we also know that we have to simplify this, and we want to be able to take back control of the data. So how do we do that? And the answer is this. It's quite straightforward, which is this, and this is what we propose, which is a data and integration hub. We think this is the best way to simplify your landscape, keep control of your data. The aim behind this is intended to act as a bit of a data exchange for all the apps in your landscape. So the data that comes from any of these systems will sit in the data and integration hub, and from there it can then be sent to any other system in your landscape. So if an piece of employee data is here in core HR, it can then be put into the data and integration hub and consumed by any other system here. Plus, where if you look at the time and absence example that I used before, if the time and absence system needs cost centers, if it needs to send data to payroll, all of that goes into the data integration hub, and then payroll just gets its information from one source. Time and absence system gets its information from one source rather than having to bring data by various integrations from multiple systems. We can simplify that to all the information being in one place, and then that information being sent to the right system. So this gives you a single source of data, and removes the necessity to retrieve data from multiple sources from one system. One advantage here is it makes it very simple to manage the evolution of your HR landscape. So replacing individual systems becomes much easier. So for example, with your time and absence system, I'll go back to that example because it's always a good one. But if I replace the time and absence tool in this diagram, I have to replace a feed from the core HR tool and back, a feed to the ERP, feed to payroll. That's multiple things, multiple parts of the architecture that I have to touch and I have to replace. In this model, you only have to just unplug the existing time and absence system from the data hub and then replace it with a new one, because then it's going to the same information it needs is already here in the data hub. You don't need to rebuild anything there, and the time and absence data that it sends elsewhere just needs to be fed back into the same model and then mapped to send it in the same way to the systems that consume it. So really, this is a way to easily, where you do have some legacy applications or custom tools that maybe you can't remove in the short term, but you do want to remove in the medium and long term as you consolidate your landscape, maybe as you or move to a more modern tool set. That's what this data and integration hub will allow you to do. And of course, some of these things, for example, recruiting or skills, some of these may end up being folded up into your core HR system as those core HR systems develop over time. So we know that those systems are getting better and they're becoming, the functionality is becoming richer. So you may be able to reduce the volume of systems you have down a little bit. And that data and integration hub will always be there to support all the other local tools and specific tools that you will still need. Overall, this should improve the consistency and accuracy of your data and make life easier, both from a business and from a technical perspective. Okay, let's move to the next part. So at Epicenter, we provide as I mentioned before, at Epicenter, this is what we specialize in. We specialize in integration and data. And this is one of the reasons why I joined the company in the first place. So rather than being an afterthought, managing data flows is at the heart of everything that we do. In fact, it's all that we do. And we provide the leading integration and data hub in the HCM world. So our tools and services are going to cater to all of your data needs to start with the correct data and also to manage it on an ongoing basis. Now, there's a very good reason why I've split our services here into two, because one relates to more of the project and how you start off with the correct data. And then after that, the majority of our services and products are related to managing those data flows and managing that quality on an ongoing basis. I could talk for a very long time about managing data flows, but I will instead point you to another resource after this, because otherwise we'll be here all day. So let me start on the left-hand side. We start with the correct data. For this, we have data migration. So our data migration is we take data from the legacy source, we map it, and we load it into our data, into our integration and data hub. And from there, we have automated tools to validate that data, and we have automated tools to load that data into the target system, making this a much quicker and more repeatable process. So that's how we can help start with the correct data, and that data migration process can often be a long drawn out process that we can make quicker and more efficient for you. Second part, and the majority of what we do, is about managing those data flows and managing that whole landscape and how the data flows between your systems. And for that, we have configurable outbound automated interfaces. So that's our ability to make simple, configurable interfaces that are quick to deploy and built by our solution experts. On top of that, we have a library of pre-configured turnkey interfaces. Now, these are interfaces that are plug and play, ready to go out of the box, and we have those that support over 60 countries already in this library. So we are almost sure to have something that will fit your needs. That's payroll providers, global HR system providers as well. For example, to learning tools, ERPs, payrolls, we cover all kinds of things, and this library is growing all the time. So not only do we have outbound integration, we also have inbound integration, so any data that needs to go into your core HR system, we can cover that, and that also will include the upload of documents. We also, and this is a very cool solution for managing your data, your data quality is something we call data realignment. And this is something where we can compare data between multiple systems that are connected to our hub. We can identify any conflict in the data. So one example data point there is cost center. And our cost center might be in your payroll system, might be in your ERP, might be in your time and attendance tool, and in your core HR system. If all of those systems are connected, then we have the ability to compare the data point, the cost centers for your employees across all of those systems, and then we can produce reports out of that to identify any data discrepancies. So this is something that is a really powerful tool as part of any regular data quality audits that you may conduct from time to time. So that's an example of how our tools can be applied to fix the challenges that I've talked about today. And so I'm just going to finish up with a very quick recap. So what we've covered today, and really I've tried to do this in 20 minutes, and this topic really could really probably take a whole day, to be honest. But HR data is more important than ever in this data-driven era. We know that cloud HCM applications are great products these days, rich functionality, outstanding user experience, so much better than it used to be even 5 years ago. And we know that companies are investing in these products. So companies are moving to cloud, they're migrating to these systems, they're getting the benefits from them, but they're also buying a lot of smaller cloud products as well to fit those niche requirements. So we still end up with that core HR plus best of breed landscape that I showed earlier. Adding to this, the realities of global organizations, and how these things, how business, the business world, and even how things like the current pandemic, etc., can all lead to business decisions and changes, and these things can lead to a complex IT architecture throughout the whole enterprise, but also for our HR department. And that in turn poses a risk to the integrity and quality of data if you don't manage how that data is transferred and audited and controlled and managed between all of those different systems. Lastly, we've talked about how using a dedicated integration and data hub, such as the one we offer, offers a cost-effective way to manage these data flows, offering simplicity, increased automation, and increased data quality across your landscape. So that's really the recap of what we talked about today. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of food for thought, just to trigger a few thought processes. And at that point, I'll leave this up on the screen just for the last few minutes while we go to any questions. And for that, I'm going to hand back to Jean-Bart.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That was very insightful presentation, and we do have a couple of questions lined up. So I see one came in regarding, in the future, will a multi-application landscape become less common as cloud core HR systems continue to develop?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think I sort of touched on that a little bit, but I will expand on it. So for me, I think that all these core HR systems are getting better, and they are covering more application than they ever did before, more requirements for HR, more processes, more data points. However, I do think there's always going to be those niche functionalities, whether that's localized geographical time reporting or payroll, and also some niche sort of talent management and recruiting functionality. And I think there'll always be that aftermarket for those other systems as well. So I don't really expect that to change too much in the future.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one. Does Epicenter work on international level on these types of projects?
Yes, absolutely. So we have clients across all continents of the globe, from small companies through to very large global ones as well. And our pre-configured interface library that I mentioned covers already more than 60 countries. We have interfaces available out of the box, plug and play in all of those. And yes, we operate across all geographies.
Excellent, thank you. Another one came in regarding, do you have any insights regarding talent and development data collection? So how can I get better data when we talk about soft skills and leadership?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you. Who is that one? Who is that one from, Jean-Bart?
That's from Matthias. Matthias Jacob.
Matthias, thank you. That's a very good question. So talent and development data collection. Well, actually, it's quite an interesting one, because I think this is really challenging, and I think a lot of the value that you have in talent management modules really relies on actually getting this kind of data correct. So I think for me, this is about defining what those skills are that are relevant to your business. I think what I've seen a lot of companies do is have this quite free form, and you end up with a large list of skills that really you can't ever really decipher or get anything meaningful out of it. So I think getting better data for soft skills, I think that's something that you have to do. Well, actually, I think I misread the words skills there. I was just talking about skills, but soft skills are actually even harder. Skills, I think you can manage if you have a skills library, but soft skills and leadership, they're much harder to quantify and qualify. But I think having that measured in a similar way, having certain soft skills and leadership skills in some kind of database people can attach to, I think that's the only way to really manage that data.
Okay. Hope that answers Mateus's question. And there's another one here. Do the barriers to managing data flows exist for large companies only, or also smaller companies?
I think they're more prevalent in larger companies. They do exist in smaller organizations, but typically larger companies, particularly with a global footprint, they tend to inherit more complexity because of the nature of the business and the nature of operating in multiple geographies. So I think as a small company, you're able to better manage in one system than you are if you're a large global organization. So I'd say this is probably more common in larger companies than in smaller ones.
Okay. All right. Just conscious of time. We're running a couple of minutes over. So thank you very much, Dave. I hope this answers the majority of the questions. If there's any further questions, please feel free to ping them over. Everyone has access to our LinkedIn website or the LinkedIn Epicenter page. This concludes our webinar today, and I hope you have enjoyed your time with us and were able to take away something valuable. So Epicenter hosts these webinars regularly, and our next webinar will be in a few weeks' time. So to be notified when registration is open, you can follow us on LinkedIn. At the same time, remember, I will also make sure that all of the attendees and those registered will be sent an email with the link of the recording for you to share or for future references. So again, thank you for your participation and have a great week ahead. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.